So my name is Julia Pearce. I am a social psychologist, and all of my work focuses on understanding, informing public responses to extreme events.
Fantastic. And Atiya.
I'm Atiya Kamal. I'm a health psychologist and professor, and my work looks at the role of culture and the local context in changing health behaviour.
Yeah, so we started working together during COVID. Actually, at the very beginning of COVID, we met each other, and I think it's fair to say that the TAPIE model is very much a response to those health inequality, that were exposed during that time, the communication challenges that became really very stark and very important. But it also has much deeper roots. Both of us were working independently before we met in related areas, and I think that it would be fair to say I'm always nervous of speaking on somebody else's behalf, so Atiya, chip in if you disagree. But I think this is really the culmination of everything that we've done, and I think that as I say, what COVID did was it created that moment that brought us together, that really solidified how important it was to get this right, and so that was the sort of immediate context in which we developed the model. If I wanted to pinpoint the kind of the prompt, it would be that we had been conducting research across 18 months, repeatedly going back to people, both communities, but also people working in crisis comms, public health. And we got to the end of the project and we were still getting feedback that people were saying, we know we need to do this. We know it's important to adapt our communications, but we still don't know how to. And yet we were speaking to other people who were doing brilliant work that we didn't want to be lost. So it was sort of bringing those things together. So there was a real sort of apparent need that came out of COVID, but I wouldn't want to overemphasize it being too COVID specific.
Brilliant. So, for those that haven't seen it, and I know it's been out now for a short period of time, but can you explain to me kind of what the TAPIE, TAPIE model is?
Yeah, so I can talk us through the model. It's an evidence-based framework. So our five pillars, they are they're interdependent. So the first is trust. This is about recognizing that trust is the driver for essentially all risk and crisis communication, and people are more likely to adopt recommended health behaviours when they trust the individuals and organisations providing advice, but also the safety and efficacy of the interventions themselves. Then we have accessibility, which is about ensuring communications are easy to access, they're relevant, and that's about sort of very hyper-localized communications and recognizing our mode of communication will differ even within sort of larger groups. So subgroups will have different preferences in terms of how they would like to receive their comms. Then we have partnership, which is very much the central pillar of our TAPIE communications model. It's about how to not only establish but maintain and sustain partnerships, and these are partnerships not only with other organisations but partnerships at within organisations and at a national and regional level as well. So it's about developing and maintaining those relationships. Then we have inclusivity, and this is about ensuring communications they're sort of aligned with the values of your target community, and they avoid inadvertently stigmatizing and othering communities as well. So sometimes we are targeting our communications to support a particular group, but sometimes that might accidentally or unintentionally highlight them as being a problem when they're not. And then we have E for empowerment. So this is about how power is shared between organisations and stakeholders, communities, and about promoting sort of effective dialogue. So this is about what the TAPIE model does is it's a way of working continuously. This is not about a single time point intervention. These are principles that are enduring. Hence, it's something that can be used before, during, and after non-communicable diseases or any sort of crisis more broadly. Julia, anything else to add in terms of the principles?
I don't think so.
Yeah, just Explain, you know, you said it was obviously evidence-based. So
Mhm.
just give us I know it's probably like lots and lots of work, but a little kind of insight into what that means, I suppose, for people who don't know your
Yes.
areas of work.
Absolutely. So, of course, we've got lots of theories of behaviour, of communication, and across lots of different pieces of work. So, this is work that we had conducted with communities themselves in London and Birmingham. So, we were talking to diverse groups, Latin American, Black Caribbean, Pakistani heritage groups. We drew on work with public health practitioners. We've checked in with national partners and regional stakeholders. This is about sort of developing the principles came about from lots of formal research and insights, so surveys and interviews. But what we then did was we conducted a series of workshops where we had sort of groups of the people who we envisaged would use this toolkit, and they gave us some really important feedback in terms of making sure that this would be useful in practice. So we hosted workshops in London, Birmingham, online to really maximise our reach. Some of our work, Julie, included public health practitioners across the entire UK, didn't it? So we had quite good reach in terms of the practitioner level insights that we generated, and in line with that we made lots of changes to make sure it was actionable.
Yeah. I mean, it is super practical. I think that's that's really clear. So obviously that played into that. And the trust, accessibility, partnership, inclusivity, empowerment, all really relevant for, as you've kind of said, not just specifically in a health context. So what do you think this could mean for crisis communications or for people working in that area by looking at this model?
Yeah, I think thank you for noticing that. I mean, we developed, so there were a couple of reasons why we developed the framework in the context of communicable disease outbreaks. Part of it was because, as Atiya has described, a lot of the underpinning research was done during COVID. And so what you don't want to do is to say, hey, this is going to work without knowing that it works in a particular context. So that felt logical and sound. And we were also in that second follow-up project where we developed the toolkit, lucky enough to be working with the Health Equality and Health Inclusion team at UKHSA, who were developing some work to support the communicable disease outbreak management
Mm.
guidance. So that allowed us to move beyond COVID and test it against other types of communicable disease outbreak, just to make sure that it wasn't, say something that was sort of very peculiarly COVID that wouldn't work in other perhaps shorter outbreak contexts or different types of outbreaks, different types of affected populations as well. I think that's probably something we haven't spoke too much. This is about identifying who will be disproportionately affected by any incident and recognizing that won't be the same for all incidents. And
Mm.
again, that's part of that kind of adaptive approach to communication. So our sense is that this would make sense if we were looking at any kind of low likelihood, high impact type event. We need to test that. That's the next steps. We want to look at it within testing it within different contexts. But I think you're right. I think for us, if you can get that trust and that partnership right, if you can make sure that your comms are accessible and inclusive, then I mean the E is almost the outcome. You're empowering your communities to make good decisions, whether that be directly in response to a communicable disease outbreak or whether that's about a decision around evacuating during flooding incidents, something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so we've divided the toolkit into 4 sections. So in terms of how to engage with it practically, there's a section on engaging with it just in terms of familiarizing them, ourselves with those principles. But then we have different chapters for before, during, and after communicable diseases, and we envisage each of those sections can be used, independently, standalone items, or across piece. And they can be used either as individuals in terms of, enhancing your own knowledge, but also as teams. So, sitting together as a team, going through them, asking reflective questions. What more can we be doing? And we've got lots of, at the end of each chapter, there are questions that teams can consider in terms of their own practice. So it's not a checklist. You know, it's sort of structured with a series of questions, but it's about recognizing that this is a process. And so while there are lots of important things to do when it comes to tailoring communications, it could be that you just need to prioritize one or two. So it's about building gradually, because what we want is for this work to become routine practice, as opposed to just something that we pick up and put down, because this is about maintaining and sustaining trusted relationships. So things like when we talk about inclusivity and representation, as part of building trust, you know, representation isn't just about identity. This is also about making sure the people that you bring on board have the relevant expertise. You know, they are seen as credible. It's about using empowering language. So when we talk about underserved communities, recognizing that that is disempowering, and so, you know, and hard to reach is the disempowering language. And so it's about saying underserved communities. Yeah. My apologies, I got that in the wrong way around. But it's about language matters is the most important thing here. And so it's sort of keeping in mind the while we're talking about groups and communities, and we think we've narrowed it because we might be talking about a region, or we might be talking about a particular ethnicity or other demographic, there are subgroups within those as well. So it's recognizing that not all groups are the same, which is why the partnership piece is so important. Julia, any other tips?
Yeah, and I suppose I'm just bouncing off what Atiya is saying, that I think it's about not feeling overwhelmed, because I think sometimes we can feel that it is big, it is difficult, and actually hopefully breaking it down, it gives that framework to have an action plan where you say, I don't have to be able to do all of this at once, but what are the pieces I can put in place? And I think, I suppose when I think about concrete tips rather than process tips, it is that sort of recognizing that those relationships, the experience of working together can be both positive, but it can also be negative, and sort of checking in regularly to see what that outbreak or what that event has done to the relationship. Has it strengthened it? And if it has, how do we keep it strong? And if it's damaged it, how can we work to not be in that position next time? And I think, again, it's something, I think, you know, we spoke earlier to that partnership working piece in the way that we developed the toolkit. And we were very keen not to come in and tell really experienced professionals who know what they're doing how to do their jobs. That's not our intention. But I think there's something about that kind of encouraging people to just keep checking in. That would be a tip. Just keep checking in. Is this still working? Do we need to do something different? Is there a different group? Are we laser focused on one particular functional need, and there's another group that perhaps that we haven't worked with so effectively? So I think probably lots, but hopefully that's a useful starting point.
Yeah, I do think it's really important to highlight. You know, we structured it as a before, during, and after piece intentionally, because, and this came through really strongly in our work with our stakeholders, is the work that you do before a crisis. And, you know, and this toolkit speaks to that. The work that you do before a crisis can then make those communications so much easier when you are, you know, when you're during that crisis, because resources are stretched, and there's so much more going on immediately. So that time, attention, and resourcing where you can before and after is absolutely key to that effective response during.
And
yeah, sorry, I was just going to pick up on that I think there's also something about us not being naive to the fact that we seem to be in a kind of perma-crisis situation at the moment. And so thinking about the full cycle doesn't mean that we're not aware that you're probably in the middle of a different crisis where you're trying to wrap up and deal and plan for the next one. And of course, that adds extra layers of complexity and challenge, which is why I'd like to sort of say this isn't an all or nothing framework. It's a framework that can be applied incrementally, and that whatever we can do to as I say, to support people who perhaps need the support, or to refresh people who know what they're doing, to bring people together. And I mean, that's one of the things that really came out of our research, that there's some amazing work being done. And if we can connect those people, it's that perennial problem of getting those networks of networks in place so that that practice can be shared. Yes, that's also incredibly helpful.
And I was going to jump in because I just wanted to finish with, does it matter whether it's TAPIE or TAPIE?
No, is the quick answer. It's regional. It's like Bath or Bath. It's a pronunciation thing. And it's funny, when we first came up with it, we both immediately pronounced it differently from each other, because we have a Southerner and a Midlander working together. And we thought, oh, do we need to rechange the name of the model? Is this, something that we need to rethink, because people are not going to know if it's TAPIE or TAPIE? And we decided that, in the interest of inclusion, that we're not going to force either of us to pronounce in a way that we're not comfortable with.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.